Now, if at some point it came to be realized that we really can't have endless war with humans, at least at the level of thermonuclear war, because there would only be one launch and it'd all be over. Guys I know at the Pentagon said every single war game ever done, accidental or deliberate launch of a nuclear weapon, it leads to DEFCON. It's a full launch of all of them everywhere, if not immediately, within a matter of days. So the problem becomes, how do you keep the largest industry in the world going if peace breaks out? The largest industry in the world is war. The military, industrial, laboratory, financial, gangbangster complex. You gotta find a bigger enemy. So, a few thousand misguided, quote, terrorists, which do exist. We can spend $1 trillion a year fighting this threat. But what they're really wanting to do is keep that system on life support until they roll out the big one, which Wernher von Braun predicted, and not only predicted, but saw the plans for it, and I've seen them also, and that's the false flag interplanetary threat. And as you know, General MacArthur, in his last address to the Congress said World War III will be interplanetary. That was in the 50s. So for longer than I've been alive, there has been an unspoken, covert agenda to misinform and disinform the public on this issue and allow just enough disclosure to happen, but with the spin on it that it's a threat. And so we're now into 3 generations, 60 years, a generation's about 20 years, of this kind of brainwashing and propaganda. And so that is a huge problem. It is actually the biggest barrier to our going forward as a civilization, and it most certainly is the biggest barrier to you becoming an ambassador to these civilizations. Because if you have been taken in by that agenda and have absorbed into your paradigm the fear or hatred of any of these civilizations based on anything you have heard or read, or even experienced, because you may have been a victim of military-conducted abductions, which are the dominant experience. We'll get into this if you want to. It's not a pretty picture. I know the people who actually run the operations. I've met with them. It's not theoretical on my part. Then if you have that in your mind, and that fear and hatred is operative, you're not going to be able to be out under the stars with even a small group of people. Go into quiet, calm consciousness in a state of inviting, but you don't just call them in. They're not dolphins at SeaWorld. But inviting them, and whether they show up or not in a way you see with your 5 senses, they're going to pick this up, just like the random number generators are going to pick up just before 9/11. They're scanning all of this. Their technologies, communication and visual, cross over into the realm of thought, astral, and intention. So if you have the intent to say, well, I hear what Dr. Greer is saying, but I really only want the ones that look like pretty Nordic babes to show up, nothing's going to happen. Nothing. In fact, we've had experiences where there have been people who have come on these week-long expeditions who have had undisclosed agendas related to that paradigm of division of the good and the bad ones. And they're really not wanting to be true ambassadors to the universe and all sentient beings. And every time one of those people goes to the bathroom, a craft shows up. Or if they stay home, or they get altitude sickness because we're up at 10,000 feet somewhere in the mountains. It's uncanny. We've watched this happen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So if you have that in your paradigm, I would suggest that if you're not here, you can go to bed now. If you are here, you can go back home, because there's really no point in pursuing. The question of intent is a paper I wrote. The intent, the purpose, has to be something deeper than the divisiveness and the consciousness that's gotten us to the state we're on in right now. And as Einstein said, no problem is solved by the level of consciousness that created it. So the consciousness of separation, hatred, division, us versus them, that isn't going to be the solution going forward. And we cannot trade international conflict and become a peaceful global civilization only to trade world peace for interplanetary war. Therefore, even if there are civilizations out there that are truly extraterrestrial and not stagecrafted by the covert military and intelligence projects, and as I said, I can't prove a negative. I can't make a blanket statement. It would still behoove us to adopt this paradigm and behave ourselves in this way. Why? All of you may have been familiar with the so-called Maharishi effect, when they started having lots of people meditate in a city and the crime rates would go down. Remember that study? It's real. They've been reproduced. Imagine if we get thousands of people, millions of people, doing these deep meditations with the intent of creating universal peace. Might it affect civilizations that have a proclivity towards conflict or harm? It would. It would. And so no matter what your belief on this is, the path of wisdom and safety is exactly this approach. Deep consciousness, the oneness that we all share together, universal peace without prejudice. And if there's a point of conflict, it isn't going to be solved down the barrel of a laser gun or a rail gun. Because when you're talking about interstellar technologies that are transdimensional, a hydrogen bomb looks like a tinker toy. It's not even a musket. And so any civilization that can reach this corner of the universe, as well as the classified projects that have weaponized, reverse engineered, as well as innately developed human scalar and longitudinal electromagnetic systems, we'll get into this. If that were to be engaged in a level of conflict, it would last a fraction of a nanosecond and all life on Earth would terminate. Therefore, that isn't an option. Those of you who are addicted to war and conflict and having someone else to hate, it's not politically correct to hate someone who's black or gay or, well, in some countries it is still, or this or that. But it's perfectly okay, particularly amongst people who would pretend to be so new age, to hate this species or that species of ETs. There is nothing new age about that. That is the worst of the old yuga. That's the worst of the old age. And so, and I hate to be so blunt, and if I'm offending any of you, I actually don't apologize. I think you need to hear this. But it's something that you have to begin to contemplate. How are we going to go forward as a civilization if we just keep replacing one enemy with another? I mean, after all, my father, who fought in World War II, it was hand-to-hand combat with the Japanese. Now we're very close friends with the Japanese, after we each killed millions of each other's citizens. So to what end is this kind of approach to problem solving of conflict and war? It isn't a solution. And at one time, okay, well, you have armies of people with bows and arrows, and then rifles, and then muskets, and then machine guns, and then atomic weapons, and then hydrogen bombs, thermonuclear weapons, which are different from atomic. Look it up, but they're much more powerful. And now we're talking about technologies that are infinitely more destructive than hydrogen bombs. Are we really thinking we're going to go forward in that paradigm and survive it? So this is why I'm making a call for people of reason and vision and true deep spirituality to become these ambassadors representing humanity to these civilizations, free of prejudice, free of fear. And here's a beautiful thought. As Krishna said to Arjuna on the battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita, a little of this eliminates all fear. The this was a capital T, It's that state of samadhi, pure consciousness. And why is that? Well, it's the same reason that most people who've had a near-death experience aren't afraid of death and don't have the fear most people have. And that is, you realize there is no death, and that your true inner self is not only infinite and omnipresent and eternal, but there really is no death. So what are you afraid of if you have that experience over and over and over again in the state of quiet, pure consciousness? So if you're enlightened, you're not afraid of death. It doesn't mean you want to die, but you're not afraid of it. Now, you may not want to have, an experience of suffering or torture. That's different, all right? I've had plenty of, anyway, I won't go into how I have been tortured by classified projects to stop what I'm doing. It is torture. But because they're sadists at heart. But so you don't want that, but you do want to be able to have an understanding of that you're really not mutable. You're immutable. You're eternal. And if you understand that, then you're going to be able to have any kind of contact with any civilization from any star system, and you won't be afraid because you will be centered in the place of the placeless. You'll be centered in this quiet, deep state of mind that precludes fear and the fight or flight response of the midbrain of the animal nature. Now, this is really important because some years ago, those of you who have read some of the books, when we were in England, the year that we had an amazing experience, it was the same year we put the CSETI logo up, and we visualized it. We went on top of a mountain, a hill in England, Woodborough Hill, and we didn't know that we were going to project this and send this to the ETs till we got up on the hill. And we went up there and we went, let's do an equilateral triangle, 3 circles connected by lines. And there were maybe 12 of us. So we went into deep meditation using what I'm going to teach you tonight, and then kind of remote viewed space in the air around us and connected to the transdimensional interstellar crop circle makers. Not Doug and Dave. Not the ones with the boards, but the real ones. And within hours, a farmer within line sight of where we were, a field within line sight, found this crop circle, exactly this shape. You're going to see it this weekend if you haven't seen it already, in a field. And it was a crop circle CE5, close encounter, and that was how, and they got it and communicated and said, yes, we hear you. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. When I decided to move to where I live now at this farm in Virginia, I was really debating whether to move it and get there or not. As soon as I signed the contract for the property, I was told and then found online and then got a physical copy of the paper that virtually this same crop circle appeared in a field owned by the man who was the broker who was selling us our property. And it was the most beautiful, it was a similar version to this, and it appeared as an affirmation from them that that's where I should go. So this gets really strange. No one in the world knew that I was even looking in that area of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia to move, except my wife and this agent. So they're always wired into what we're doing, and it becomes highly interactive. And once you understand what the nature of your own self and your mind, people say, how often is there contact? I said, it's continuous. It's like the operating system. You're in that state and you're going along. It's not like you're continuously seeing UFOs. I'm not saying that, but you're continuously locked into that level of cosmic civilization, and all kinds of things that seem like complete magic just happen on an ongoing basis all the time. Beautiful. And that's what I want you to understand, that this is not just something you have to do and when you're going out into the stars with 3 or 4 other people, it's a state of being where you're an ambassador of these civilizations, and it causes this huge field effect change. So just as something negative can be anticipated and register on a random number generator like 9/11, something enormously positive, which is actually more powerful when a lot of people are doing it, can have an effect on entire civilizations, ours and these interstellar civilizations. So this is not just a laboratory experiment. This is us co-creating together the next chapter in human civilization. And that's really why we're here. You didn't know that, but that's really why you're on this planet right now. You're really on this planet. We are the... I have a book in the works. It'll probably not come out for a while now because I have so many other things going on. That's really called the Last Generation and the First Generation. We are the last generation to bear witness to this era of separateness, linearity, division, war, and global eco-destruction. But we're the first generation, those of us between the ages of puberty and senility, to create and bear witness to and manifest the early beginnings of a world and interplanetary civilization that is running on free energy, anti-gravity, the science of consciousness, the ability to live in complete harmony with Gaia, which is a conscious living being who is female, and to become interstellar within our lifetime. Within our lifetime. Well, maybe. And what is that dependent on? That's dependent on us doing the right thing and choosing the path that isn't recapitulating thousands of years of separation and endless war, but looking into the future with a new consciousness that is this unitive state, and where there are no aliens, but everyone are actually emanations of our own true inner self, that state of oneness. And so at that point, there's no foundation for war, there's no foundation for separation, and there's no basis for fear. And this is why, not only from a practical, operative point of view, we have to be in this state of consciousness, but from a philosophical and ethical point of view, we have to understand and live that state of consciousness. Because at that point, we're going to be able to be ambassadors to the universe, but ambassadors to ourselves, and manifest the world that has been foretold for thousands of years. I mean, this is the time where our civilization has been asked to leave off the old ways. It's a bit like the metamorphosis of a butterfly. Leave off that shell and let the butterfly emerge, and then take flight. And this is not something that is going to take thousands of years. This is something actually that's been banging at the door of our consciousness and of our planet for 100 years. But these civilizations aren't going to land on the White House lawn, like Larry King asked me, and enforce it, because force never works. Internally manifested true power does. And if we try to force something like this, and if they were to try to force it, it would never work. So it has to come from this point of realization and acceptance. And these civilizations are simply waiting. And when I first founded this project, I was shocked, actually, because I started having CE5 events happening when I was 18. So I had a near-death experience when I was 17. 3 months later, I learned meditation on my 18th birthday. And a few months later, I was up in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina in a deep state of meditation, went into samadhi, and then had a contact experience with ETs and co-created the protocols I'm teaching you this weekend. And then I didn't do anything with it for a while. But what I realized is that, and that was 1973. So, I'm no spring chicken. I've got 8 grandchildren and 4 children now. Yeah. So yeah, it was beautiful. Really, I love family. They're beautiful, and this is, but that experience, which has been going, they've really been asking. And I thought at the time, well, this is a very strange experience. I didn't know what I'd do with it until I was told to do something with it in 1990, 17 years later. And so here we are. But what came clear through these experiences, when we first started going out with people, immediately there would be massive CE5 events happen, witnessed by people. And I was going, wow. Not only is, I knew it worked, but and what I was told by the ETs intuitively was that we're waiting for you. You guys are sitting here waiting for us. We're waiting for you. So they're waiting for us to take the initiative. That's why I call it the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative. We take the initiative. We are the children of Earth. This is our home planet. We need to grow up and take responsibility for it in every way possible. But we also have to then invite them to interact with us openly, because they simply do not want to force the issue. And the only way they would force it is if they had to. And that is, we go into interstellar war because our weapon systems reach parity with theirs, or we destroy so much ecosystem damage that there's sort of a need to have a rescue mission to the planet. But those are worst case scenarios. Let's not let it get to that. And then there would be a massive intervention. That was in that paper. When I first wrote about in 1991, consciousness-assisted technologies, but also technology-assisted consciousness. Goes both ways. Consciousness can assist the technology, but there can be technologies that augment your consciousness and project it. ETs have it, classified projects have it. But I wrote that there were only a few scenarios under which there would be this kind of overt involvement, because they really want it to be gentle. They're waiting for us to answer the call that's been ringing, this cosmic call that's been ringing for decades, because we have really reached the point as a global civilization to have come together in peace and created interplanetary relationships with these other civilizations. We just haven't done it. And so this is the real question for each of you. Are you ready to become an ambassador from Earth and humanity to these other civilizations? And if you are, then let's do it together. And that's really what we want to share tonight and this weekend and going forward in how we live our lives. All right? So what I would like to do is let people get up and take about a 20-minute stretch break and a comfort break. And then after that, we'll come back, and from 10 o'clock until 11, we're going to go through a breathing meditation technique, and then I'm going to do the sacred puja and share with you a Sanskrit mantra and take you through the process of meditation so that tonight, tomorrow morning, you can practice it, so that tomorrow afternoon, when I begin to teach you some remote viewing techniques and approaches, you'll have a foundation in consciousness to practice them. Does that make sense? All right, we'll see you in 20 minutes. Thank you.